Welcome everyone. Today's video is going to be a three-part video. It's going to probably be a fairly long video. So what I'll do is I'm going to put some chapters to this video so you can click down on the bottom of the video. And if you were here just to learn about one of these three areas that I'll be covering today, just go ahead and use those chapters to navigate to that section. But what we're going to cover today is the process that I use to analyze my online chess games. Then we're going to look at how you can use that analysis to help build a chess opening repertoire. And then finally, we're going to look at converting an opening repertoire that you made into a private Chessable course so that you can use that to learn it and review it. So the first thing I wanted to do though was just mention and share the how I came up with this idea for this video. And for that I'm just going to pull up my YouTube channel here quick. So I just recently made a trailer and intro video for the YouTube channel, and I received a lot of helpful and encouraging feedback, and as part of that I received an idea for a video or a request, and two very supportive community members put this idea forward, and so that's where I got the idea for this video. Charles, he asked, let me expand this here. He said, question, have you thought about doing a video on how best to analyze a person's own games to improve? And then Michael replied to that and said, I second Charles' suggestion. In particular, I'd like to hear your ideas on 1, how to use game analysis to build an opening repertoire, and 2, how to convert that repertoire into a private Chessable course for further study and learning. And so that's what I'm going to try to cover in this video today. Thanks for the feedback and all the support with this channel. Hopefully you guys will be the judge of whether or not I succeeded in tackling those requests or suggestions that you guys have. So with that being said, let's tackle the first video, and that is where we go through the process of analyzing a chess game. Alright, so in the first part of this video, I'm going to go through the process that I use when I analyze my online games. And I know Charles wanted a defined process for this, so what I thought I would do is I thought about the steps that I do, and I listed them out here on this sheet. And basically there's 10 steps, and so I'll just go through them real quickly here, but then what we're going to do is we're going to go through each step using a game that I played this morning, and I'll go through this this process, and then we can learn how I do it that way. So step number 1, and this is the most important step of all, is when you get done with your game, you just got done playing your game, do not hit the engine analysis button. So both Lichess and chess.com have this button where you can hit and it'll have the computer analyze the game. Do not do that. What we're going to do instead is step number 2, we're going to download a database file of that game, and I'll show you how we do that. Then we are going to put that into a Lichess study, and I'll start one from scratch and show how that process is done. And then what I like to do is the first thing I do is I go to the end of the game and I make an annotation at the end of the game with my general thoughts about the game. So it can be like psychological things, just my general impressions of the game. Did I play well? Did I play bad? What do I think was important? Just real quick, you don't want to get hung up on it, but just some real quick impressions of the game. And that's why I think it's important to do this right after you play the game, when your emotions are still raw from the game. Then what I like to do is, without turning the engine on, of course, I like to go to the point in the game that I felt was the most critical move of the game. And what I like to do is I like to analyze that in my head when I have a little bit more time than I may have had in the game, and I try to go through the variations, and we'll do that as we go through this actual process. Then, still before we've turned the engine on, I like to examine the opening, and I'll either use a database or I'll use a Chessable course, and I'll show you how we do that, or how I do that anyway. Then at that point, I go ahead and I run a computer analysis of it. And what I'll do is I'll go back into either Lichess or chess.com, and I'll have left my window open where I was playing the game, and I use the Learn from Your Mistakes feature. Both of those websites have that, and so I'll do that. Then I'll go back into my Lichess study where I'm examining or analyzing the game, and I'll look for big swings in the computer's analysis. And where you see a big swing up or down either way, I will go to that and try to see what I can learn from those swings, because those are the moments where games are won or lost, especially for us club players. There'll be a lot of swings in those games. Then what I do is I have one area of focus, and for me right now, and by focus I mean like what is my highest priority, something I want to look at every game I play to see how I'm doing on it, because it's something that will help my performance immensely. And for me, that currently, and has been for a while, is my time management. I used to kind of spend too much time and go into the tank and waste a lot of time on moves that weren't critical. And so then I like to, say, okay, how did I do with my time management in this game? And that way I keep reinforcing it and improving it over time. And then the final step I do is I log my final thoughts on the game. I go underneath the section where I did my initial thoughts, and then I log my final thoughts. And this is useful to have your initial thoughts and compare it to your final thoughts, because your initial thoughts may have been like, oh man, I think I played terribly, and then you find out you actually played well, or vice versa. You'll notice a lot of interesting disparities between what you thought and then what the engine thought. So that is like the initial process. And so now what we'll do is I'll go in and we'll use this process on a game that I actually played. All right, so we'll start going through the process using a game that I just played this morning. And I'll put a link to the game in the video description in case anybody wanted to just go through this and kind of follow along and do the same thing to just get the process down. But so when you get done playing the game, it'll be at a screen like this, and you'll be at the last move of the game, and it's different on chess.com, but all these things will work on there as well. I'm just going to show you how to do it on Lichess today. But basically on Lichess, what you do is you hit this analysis board. It's this button on the right. And that will bring you to a screen like this. And now the key thing is to remember not to use a computer analysis yet. We want to just download this database file without all the computer's analysis, and we don't want to see the computer's analysis yet and be biased by its output. So what you can do is you can click this button that says download annotated, because if we go through here, you'll see there's not really any annotations on here other than basically the names and the time control and stuff like that, but it doesn't have any computer analysis because we haven't gone into this computer analysis button yet and ran the computer analysis, and that's why we want to capture this now. So we can go ahead and hit this button that says download annotated. So that's what we'll do. And you can see that it downloads it into the bar down here. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to go in and we're going to make a study out of it. And what I like to do is I have Lichess studies, and you can have 64 chapters in each one, but we'll pull that up and show how that's done. But I'll do a chapter for each game, and then when I fill it up, then I make a new Lichess study. So we'll do it just like we're doing it from scratch here. so that we can see how it's done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of this. If you go into the Learn button in the upper left, there's a part that says Study. So if we click on that Study, it'll default to showing everybody's studies. So these are people that let their studies be open to the public. But what we want to do is we want to create a new study. We want to create our own study. So there's this green plus button over on the right-hand side of the screen. We want to click on that to create our own study. And then you'll see this screen like this comes up. And it'll default to just your username and study for the name. So I think what we'll do is you'll name it whatever you want to name it. I'll just say Chessable Games Analyzed. And then the important thing is you want to change this to invite only. Otherwise, this will show on that first screen we saw with all those studies. The one thing I don't like is it defaults to public. And so you want to change that to invite only so that you would have to invite that username to the study in order for them to see it. And everything else here, just leave it as it is. And you just hit the start button, and then it will create this study, and it will take you to that study. And then it defaults to adding a new chapter because you have to have a chapter in the study. And what you do is you basically will hit this button that says Choose File, and then you can go to your download, put that in there. This is the file you just downloaded to your computer. And since we played with the white pieces, we want to make sure the orientation is set to white. If we chose black, it would kind of be showing it from the wrong side. We want to see it from our side. And then what we do is we hit this button called Create Chapter. And voila, it has this game that we played. It imports it into this chapter. So everything is now imported into that chapter. And so now we can actually begin the process of analyzing the game, but we will do it within this study. So now that I got the game loaded into a study and the game pulled up, what I like to do is just go to the end of the game. So I use this right arrow over here. Go to the very end of the game. And I like to just right click on it and hit comment on this move. And then this box comes in at the bottom. And what I like to do is I just type game thoughts. And then I just give my general impressions of the game, any psychological things, any just general thoughts on the game, how it went. So, for instance, in this game, I would say was afraid to enter the main line Dutch against an opponent this strong. I need to come up with a solution for the Dutch. And another general thought I had was F2 seemed to be an issue throughout the game. And black offered a draw at the end. I felt black was better. I wonder if I misevaluated this position. And it can be anything, but so the idea is we'll come back to this at the end after we look at it with the computer and compare our impression of the game with, I guess, if you want to say the truth, as the computer sees it. So then what I would do as the next step is go to the most critical point of the game, whatever moment you thought was the most important, that you had the most trouble with, and try to analyze that position and enter some lines and make some notes. And so I'll quickly go through how I do that. We won't do it in detail because it takes too long, but let's just do that real quick here. So for me in this game, the position that I felt was critical and that where I started to feel really uncomfortable was actually at the very end of the game. And my opponent spent a few minutes before he offered the draw, and I was trying to analyze this position. And the more I looked at it, the more worried I became. And so I think for adult improvers, it's a really good opportunity to just pick one of these moments during the game and really kind of roll up your sleeves and dig into it a bit, because then it kind of mimics when we get into this situation again, because we're always going to have these uncomfortable moments in games. And then as we practice this more, we become better at handling these moments. So the way I like to do it is I pretend I'm actually at the board. I cannot move any of the pieces, and I analyze the position. And so whatever method you use to analyze the position is fine. What I like to do is go through the candidate moves and analyze the lines in my head to the best that I can. And then after I do that, I physically make the moves on the board. And then I'll put like a brief note at the end of each line. Not if they're obvious, but if I'm making a judgment call as to who's better in the position. And then later when we turn on the chess engine and have the engine analyze the game, we can see how close our analysis was to that of Stockfish. So, for instance, what I was starting to worry about in this position was Black playing rook to g6, because I felt like throughout this game, my weakness in this game was this f2 pawn, and then this knight being stuck on f3 in front of this f2 pawn, with these rooks barreling down on it. And so that was kind of annoying. And so I want to analyze this because I was trying to analyze this while my opponent was thinking and ultimately decided to offer a draw. Now, I was very surprised when he did that, because my impression is that he was better. And whether that is the case, I'm not sure. It kind of makes me question it, being that he's a much stronger player than me. But my interpretation, and I don't want to put too much paint, too many arrows, because then it's hard to get off the thing. But my impression is after he plays rook to g6, he's threatening to take g3. Now I can't simply push this up and protect it by playing... I'm sorry, he's threatening to play rook to g6. He's threatening to take g2. I can't simply push it up to g3, or this rook will take this knight. So that's not an option. So another possible candidate move that fails would be rook to g1, because Black would simply take that knight, and that pawn is pinned to that rook. So that's also not an option. So in my opinion, I'll try to get rid of a little bit of this paint. It's annoying. But so in my opinion, I have two options. After he plays rook to g6, I can either play to g4 and protect the g2 pawn that way, or I can try to fight fire and say, you go ahead and grab g2, I'm going to pick off e6. And so those would be the lines I would look at in depth, see if I'm missing any other opportunities. And then once I analyzed these positions in my head and came to my conclusion, then I'll physically make those moves on the board and write my thoughts at the end of it. So we'll just look at this line real quick and just put in a note for that, but we would do that for each line that we look at. So my thought would be, okay, if I play knight to h4, he's going to play rook to g4, and he's going to be hitting that knight, right? So we got to do something about it. And then I would try to analyze it to the end, And then when I get done analyzing that, I would physically make these moves on the chessboard. And at the end of that line that we analyzed, let's pretend we're at the end here. We wouldn't be, obviously, but I would put my conclusions, and I'll say black stands. I'd just say black is better. Or I'd say much better, or winning, or something like that. And then after we run the engine at the end, we can check and see how close we were to the ultimate truth. And that's kind of how I do it. So at a minimum, I would put in that move. I would put in this move and enter the moves as far as I could see them during the game. I would also put in this move, showing that I did in fact notice that fails. I would put in this move, showing that I knew that fails, etc. So it's good work on making, practicing not overlooking candidate moves. And then I would see if there was any candidate moves I missed when I turned the computer on later. How good my assessment was of the final position. Did I see it correctly? So that's how I do that process. So the next process, the next step in my analysis process after I do this is to look at the opening. And so what I'm going to do is there's two different ways of doing it. The first one would be for people who are just following a Chessable course and you just want to learn what's in that course, and you just want to see where you strayed from that course, and then to look for suggestions in that course to see to guide you. So we'll look at that first, and then after that we'll kind of take an approach more going to Michael's suggestion for the video, where we look at how we use a game analysis to help prepare an opening repertoire. So let's bounce over into Chessable real quick, and what we'll do is we'll look at the opening. And I suppose it would be helpful probably if I actually showed you what the opening was in this game. So my opponent played the Dutch, and I have a friend that's a master that plays the Dutch, and when this player played the Dutch, I thought, well, I can only imagine what would happen if I tried to play a mainline Dutch against this friend of mine. I'd probably have zero chance of winning. So I probably have close to zero chance if I don't play the main line, but it's better than if I go down the main line. And so I ended up playing this idea where we tried to ram through e4 right away. And, got this position like this. Now we'll look at that. We'll look at this one after we look at Chessable. But what we'll do for the sake of this video is we'll just pretend, say, we were playing the London system, and we'll just go a little bit down the main line and just show you how I would approach this if I was following the lines from a Chessable course. All right, so I got Chessable booted up here, and what we'll do is I'll go into this short and sweet London system course, and what I'll do is I'll pretend I'm exclusively playing this course, and I just want to see how I played compared to the course. And then my idea is I'll see where I see where I left theory, and then try to learn one more move and just see if there's any explanation of ideas. And so Chessable has this really cool feature when you go into the course. It's called Browse Repertoire Tree. And if you hit that button, it brings up the moves from this course. And so let's just pretend we were playing like a mainline London system, because we're following the course. And for the sake of this video, we'll just pretend they went kind of down the main line, and we're following the suggestions in their course here. And we'll actually just kind of go down kind of what they have for main lines here. But let's pretend we were doing good in our game up until this point here. And let's say we messed up and we played bishop to d3. So what we would want to do is say, okay, well, the course recommended c3, so let's put this move in here, and then we can use this button down here that says find in my courses, or find in courses, actually. If we click on that, it will show all the different courses on Chessable that have this line, and we can see it. We have one from our course, which is the short and sweet London system. Now it'll show all the other courses that have it as well. So if you're using Banzia's London system and you own that course, you could just click on that and it'll take you straight to that line in the course. Same with any of these other London courses, right? If you have this London attack, that's a good course actually. I would just click on that and it would take me to that. But since that stuff is copyrighted, I'm not going to go straight in there. I'm going to just go to this short and sweet because it's a free course by Chessable. It was one of the original ones. So let me click on that. And you'll notice it takes us to the lines in the course that match where what we put into that find repertoire or find browse repertoire tree. So if we click on this, we can see that as we go through the line, we successfully made it up to here. We played bishop to d3, and we should have played c3. And so what we could do then is we could read some of the explanation here. Or if we had a course with the videos, we could start playing the video from that point and try to learn more about that position, see if we can understand why c3 was played, look at the plans as to what comes up next. We could choose, if we go back to C in chapter, we can see how many, lines there are that go down here and have E6 on move 5 followed by C3. We could look at each of these. So that would be my suggestion if you're following a Chessable course. Just pull it up, use this browse repertoire tree feature that's on the right hand side. It's a blue rectangular button. It'll be at the bottom of this course options section. And so that's how I would approach it if you're going to do it from the Chessable courses. I think that's a really good way to do it, actually. So next I'm just going to go back into the study and pretend we were doing it another way. So now if I wasn't using a Chessable course for my openings, and I was trying to develop my own through game analysis, how I would approach that is I would use this openings database on Lichess. And what I would do is at this point, I would turn the engine on up here. And what I would do is I would play through the moves, and I would compare my moves to the choices over here and look at the results. So you can see what percent of the time white wins versus black. And I would also keep an eye on this engine evaluation. And I would try to look for the first point where I made a move that deviated from theory, meaning that it'll be lower down on here, and where my engine evaluation, the computer thinks it's a bad move. And then I would try to figure out why that move was bad, and I would look at what the top choices were, both by the engine and by other players. So let's just go down this as an example real quick, and this is what we're going to cover in part 2 of this video. But you can see I made this knight to c3 move. It's not as common, but look, it's fine. It scores 51% for white, so that's actually good. And bishop to f4, second move, scores well. Engine thinks it's fine, no problem. I'm sorry, bishop g5, I mean. e6. Now e4, you can see, is the top choice. Scores really well. The engine likes it. So far, so good. He takes. I take with the knight. Everything good so far. And now we can see the top choice is bishop takes f6. And I actually played in the game knight takes f6, which I lose all my opening advantage, statistically at least, in the database. And let's see, right now bishop takes f6 is the move chosen by the computer, and it's almost a full pawn better for white. But I played knight takes f6, and looks like the computer actually doesn't mind it, but it doesn't score as well in the database. And so this is where I would, we won't do it in this part of the video. We'll look at this in the next part of the video as we're addressing how we would make a repertoire based on our game analysis. But this is where I would start to look at the other options over here, try to analyze it, use the computer, try to understand it, and then just try to learn one or two moves in this line, and then put those into the game analysis, as little notations if I want, or if I have like a chess base, if I'm using a database program like Chessbase or Hierarchs, then I would put it in there. Or if you're making your own Chessable course, as we're going to go through in part 3 of this video, then we'll look at how we would get that into there. So basically that's what I would do for the opening section of this analysis. And then we're actually at the point where we can actually run a computer analysis on this position. And to do that, we go down here and we click on this little thing here below the board. And we click this button that says Request Computer Analysis. And then we let it run, and it'll take a few moments. It's running the analysis of that game. And so now you can see it's ran that analysis and it's done. And so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to continue on our checklist. And once you've ran that computer analysis on your game in your Lichess study, then you go back into the tab that you had open after you played the game, and you pull that up, and you request a computer analysis on that game. You let that run. And then in that tab, you can use this feature called Learn from Mistakes. Now, you can't do that on the one in the Lichess study. It has to be from your game, and it's the first time you run it, basically, after you run the analysis on your game from within Lichess itself, the link to the actual game. So then we can click this button called Learn from Mistakes, and it will it will quiz us on the things we got wrong. Now, I didn't make any mistakes, probably not the best example, significant enough. So let me just play a different game real quick, and I'll just show you how that feature works. So I'll do a blitz game with a bunch of problems. All right, so I got a different game pulled up just to show how this feature works. Most of you are probably aware of this, but so this is more of my typical game graph here. So if I click this Learn from Your Mistakes, basically at any point where you made a mistake, it says, okay, you played bishop to g4 here. It points to the move that you played, and it says, find a better move for black. And then the idea is you can work and try to figure out what you did wrong. So if we look at why this is a mistake, if we move our bishop here, white has this classic sack where he takes on f7, we retake with the king, and he plays knight to g5 check, unveiling the queen on that bishop. So we definitely don't want to do that. So let's just say, well, I think maybe this is better. And it says, okay, yeah, that's better, good move. Then you hit the next button, and it goes towards the next mistake, right? And you can repeat this process until you solve them all. And so that's what I would recommend doing. And then when you're done with that, then bounce back into the study itself, the study that you created with the game in your that we're analyzing. And I would just look at this graph and look for moments where stuff changes quickly. Like this went from plus 0.6 to minus 0.3. So I would zoom in on that moment and say, okay, that it didn't like that move. Right here, this queen move out here. It went from me having an advantage to me having a slight disadvantage. Now, it wasn't a significant enough mistake to show up in the Learn from Your Mistakes function, but it's still a mistake nonetheless. And so any big changes like I see, like here would be another point on the graph. I go through and try to see like what I did wrong and just see if I can understand it. You can use the computer suggestions to see what they suggested if you can't figure it out yourself, and you can use that as a way to check you. So that's what I do as far as using the computer analysis to review the big swings in the game itself. So then the last two steps I do is whatever my focus area is at the moment, like what I see as a weakness in my game, and for me, for a while that's been time management. I used to, I still do sometimes spend too much amount of time on a move, kind of go in the tank, and then I get in time pressure later in the game. And so I like to see how I did with respect to that challenge that I'm facing, and then I'll put a note on that towards the bottom. So an easy way to do that is if you go back into the tab of your game, just where you did the learn your mistakes function, you can actually click on this thing down here under the board that says move times, and you can see how much time you spent on each move. And so if you see like a big thing here, you can see I spent 16 seconds. Obviously that's not too much time to spend in a game like this, but I think my problem here is I actually played too quickly, and part of it is I just didn't feel like I'd probably be able to figure a lot of this position out because I was kind of winging it with this knight to c3 e4 thing, but that's not good either. And so what I would do then is under our analysis, where we had put our game thoughts before, I would go back in there, and what I would do is I would write some further comments, and I would say time management, and I would say played too quickly. If there's specifics, put it in there, and then as the final step, I create a section, I call it final game thoughts. And what I do is, now that I've gone through the game, done the learn from mistakes, run the computer analysis on it, re-looked at the openings, I reconcile my initial thoughts with how I feel about it now. And so, you can see above here, I said I was afraid to enter the main line Dutch. Need to come up with a solution for the Dutch, blah, blah, blah. F2 seemed to be an issue throughout the game. Black effort to draw at the end. I felt black was better. So what I would do is I would say where my opinions now differ or confirm my original thought. So I won't waste the time right now typing that out, but I would say, yes, my suspicion was correct that I was worse in this position. I'm surprised this player offered a draw. Maybe they were just bored. I don't know. But they took a few minutes to think about it, then offered a draw, and I couldn't hit that accept button fast enough because I felt I was worse, and I was correct on that. So that's what I use for analyzing my online games. I don't claim that that's necessarily the best method. That's the method I use. I try to be consistent with it. I try to play at least 4 longer time-controlled games a week where I try to analyze it like this immediately after I play it. And that's what I suggest. You download it, load it into a Lichess study, then you can go back into it and use that learn from your mistakes feature after you've done the stuff without looking at the computer. So, take from that what you want. It seems, I'm getting good results from doing it. It's hard to know what part of, my studies and whatnot are what's leading to my improvement in chess, but I do think this really helps. I would emphasize, taking some time and analyzing the position at the moment that you've either felt it was critical, or you just kind of had a bad feeling about it, or you're nervous about it, or whatever, I think you're doing yourself a big favor by just rolling up your sleeves and really kind of digging into that position. It helps with visualization, calculation. It just helps you feel more comfortable when you get in a position that you don't feel good about during the game, because then you can just kind of snap into this other mode that you develop by doing this. So that's it for step 1. That's how, for part 1 of this video, that's how I analyze these positions. And so now we'll move on to part 2 of this video. So now in part 2 of this video, we're going to address Mike's request, and we're going to look at how we can take that analysis that we did analyzing that game and use that to produce a repertoire, to build out a repertoire from that. And then in part 3, we'll see, okay, now that we have this repertoire built, how do we export that into Chessable and use that to train? So first things first, we still have the game pulled up here in the study. And in this game, we, of course, played this 2 knight to c3 idea against the against the Dutch defense, and that's called the Raphael variation. So the first thing that we need to do if we're going to be building our own repertoire is we need to create a database. And so if you already have ChessBase, you obviously know how to do this, or if you use hierarchs, you know how to do this. But what I want to do in the beginning of this part, and then we'll go back in and look at how we actually look at our analysis of this game to build that out, is we need to create a database file. And how we'll do that is we can actually do that using a Elite Chess study again. These things are super helpful. And so what I would do is just leave this tab open up another tab of Elite Chess, just go to the main page. So that's what we'll do here. And when you get there, we're going to make a new study. So we go up under Learn, we click Study. Once again, we hit this Create Study button, this green button over on the upper right-hand side. We will click on that. And we will name that whatever we want. Let's just name it just simple YouTube White Repertoire. Good enough. Remember, we want to make sure we switch that over to invite only or unlisted if we want, either way, but we do not want it public. That's what it defaults to, and we don't want everybody to be able to see it, I'm assuming. Everything else, we can just keep this as is, and it's going to ask you to create a chapter. And so there's different ways that we could organize this. We could have like a chapter for the main lines. We could have a chapter against different sidelines. I'll kind of talk about that when we load it into the Chessable, and you can kind of take those considerations into account. But for now, let's just say White Repertoire. We're just going to throw it all into one, and we'll throw it into Chessable, and then you can decide how you want to organize these yourself once you see how it works. But what we're going to do is we want this, the orientation, we want this from White's point of view because it is a White repertoire. And so we're actually ready to go. So we just hit Create Chapter, and it's going to give us the starting position. And so nothing's in here yet. And now let's just, for the sake of this video, let's pretend that we're playing the London system. And what we're going to do is we're going to build out the beginnings of our repertoire, because we have to start somewhere, right? So let's pretend we're doing the London system, and we're doing bishop to f4 on move 2. So we'll just kind of make some of these moves. We'll just throw in some of these mainline moves, I guess, here. We'll pretend we're doing this 2 knights Tabia, and so we'll just have this, and we'll pretend we can pretend we have more, but let's we'll put a couple options in here for black. How about we do that? We'll do bishop to d6, and let's say in our repertoire we're going to move back here to g3, and then let's say we also have the move bishop to e7, and let's just say we're going to play bishop to d3. That way we have a couple different options, and we'll see how this works when we load it into Chessable, because we'll train these different variations. So now what we can do is say, okay, we got our repertoire started. We would put our lines in here that we know for sure we're going to play. If you're just starting doing this, I would just only put like I wouldn't go too deep. I would only do the stuff you know for sure you're going to play, and then as you play games, you can build it out. And so we'll show how we'll do that here, because what we'll do is we'll flip back into this game, and now we will say, okay, we decided to try this knight to c3 idea, And so we could, if we have a book or a resource we're using, we could turn to that. We could look for YouTube videos. However we wanted to try to figure this out. But my idea is I just, the approach I'm taking to openings right now is I'm learning Alex Banzia's London System course. I have a few other London System courses on there just for additional that I had before I bought Alex's course. But my what I'm doing is I'm just playing his course for the most part, but I have not yet. I'm taking his advice, and he suggests that you study the Chigorin first, and then you study another gambit, and then you just do his quick, the quick repertoire, study some of the other idea-based stuff that he has in his course, and then you go back and start learning these other chapters. So I haven't got to the point yet where he covers the Dutch. And against a strong player like this, I just did not want to go into a mainline Dutch, not knowing, what variation he's going to play, so I figured I'd be better off just playing something more offbeat. So I had seen this idea before where you play knight to c3 on move 2, and the idea is you just ram through e4. So that's why I played it in this game. I'm not an expert on it. I don't know much about it. And so this is why I thought, I just played this morning. I thought, well, this would be a good game to make this video because it was just a couple days ago that Michael did that post. And I thought, well, this would work well because maybe I'll actually play this knight to c3 thing until I get to the point where I study Alex's lines in his course, and that might be quite a ways off. So my suggestion would be is to, just like we looked at in the course, remember we analyzed, we looked at the opening and saw where we first kind of deviated from what the main plan would be. And so my advice would be to use what we picked up doing our game analysis to say, okay, basically we got to this point here, and in the game I played knight to f6, but bishop to f6 was the stronger move. And so what we would do is we would spend a little bit of time, see if we can figure out why that is. We would want to turn the computer on, and we would say, okay, well, look at how good this bishop to f6 scores. Let's play that in our repertoire, right? So we'll make this move. See, there's only one common response. They take back with the bishop. And now what's interesting is if we look at the computer here, there's a couple different ways we can play this, and that's probably actually a good thing. We can play c3. We can play our knight out to f3. Or interestingly, look at this move, queen to h5. Now, that could be an interesting way to play against this, right? So let's just look at it, see if we like it. So queen h5. I don't see any good move other than g6, right? And that's what basically they all play 96% of the time. All right, queen h6. So we're preventing them from castling. So we're willing to give up this pawn. My guess is if they grab that pawn, they're probably going to get in trouble, right? So what we could do is we can decide, okay, do we like this? If we do, let's spend a little bit of time and try to understand it a little bit. We can put some notes in here. So let's just say, these annotations you put in this box down here, you just say preventing castling. And, when we load these into our Chessable course, this will be in there, right? So, and then let's just put like two responses. It looks like queen to e7 is the first response, and it looks like the way that we respond to that is we take that bishop. So let's just put that in there. The other main next largest move that they do is they play bishop takes d4, and it looks like we just castle. And look at the computer, just loves this. It scores 64% for white, which is like off the charts huge. So, maybe we stumbled onto something here, because if we look at this, after we play this queen to h6, let's see what percent, over a quarter of the time they grab that, and they are just in trouble. This would be a fun line to play. So, we can just, we could give little notes to ourselves, but we'll just say with strong compensation for the pawn. And it's more than strong compensation. But okay, so good. Now what we would want to do is we would want to put these moves that we found into our database. So we would just go back in. This was our little repertoire we were building out. And so what we would do is we would add on F5, put these moves in here. And one thing to know too, just to know is, let's see. Oh, this little book here, you can click this and the opening book comes up. So just know about that. There's this little opening book. If it's not showing up for you as you're building out your little repertoire here, it's helpful to have that open. So this is where we know at this point we can just play E4, take with the knight, and we decided that we want to take with the bishop, and when they take back, we are going to do this queen check move. Go to H6 to prevent them from castling. And so I'm sorry, we would actually be putting the notes in this, not on the game we played. We could, for our own, that's fine to have that in there for our own reference, but we would want to put it in this, our database file that we're going to turn into a Chessable course. So we would say preventing castling. And then we were going to put in these two lines. And the move where they're a sucker and they take it. And then we just say, with the strong compensation for the pawn. I mean, even I would feel comfortable playing this position. I'm not exactly a dynamic player. So then what we could do is we say, okay, so you can see like we're building our repertoire here. This is a database file that we can download as a database file. And then let's just say like the next game we played, we're playing along and we're like, okay, we're playing our repertoire here, and all of a sudden somebody hits us with this, and we're like, oh crap, right? We can't do our thing anymore, right? Because we don't want to do this bishop to F4 move. And let's just say we do some soul search and decide what we want to play, and we decide, oh well, I used to play the French defense. Let's when somebody plays E6, let's just transpose into a French defense. And then when people were using it as a way to maneuver into a Dutch defense without facing these different anti-Dutch systems, let's just do the French exchange variation, and we're just going to try to bore these people to death. And we just decide that that's how we want to play. And so we would maybe put in a few more moves, decide what setup we're going to use. But let's just say we're just going to play this exchange French, and we're happy with that for now. So now you can see we're developing our repertoire as we go. We're adding to this Lichess study called our white repertoire. And then what we'll do now is we will make a Chessable course. Let's say we have enough lines in there now. We want to start studying this in Chessable. And what we will do is I'll go to part 3 of this video, and we'll show how we do that. All right, so in part 3, we're going to take that repertoire that we built, and we're going to load it into Chessable so we can start drilling and reviewing and learning that repertoire. We'll want to do that once we think it's big enough that we can't just remember it anymore. And so what we'll do is we go into our little repertoire that we built in our study. Now, what we want to do is we need to download this as a database file, so then we can put that database file into Chessable and make a new course. So underneath the board, there's this section, Share and Export. If you hover over it, it says Share and Export, and it's basically 2 lines with 3 connecting dots. If we click on that, it gives us different options. Now, we have chosen to put everything just in one chapter within our study. Now, if we had a bunch of chapters in here that we did and we kind of separated things out, like maybe we had the main line in one, like Maybe we had the King's Indian Defense in one, the Dutch in one. Then we could either download the entire thing and use that to load up into Chessable, or we could do it chapter by chapter. I'm just going to download this chapter because we put everything in one chapter. And so that's why I was saying it's kind of up to you how you want to organize it, in Lichess. You may want to break it out into chapters. That's fine, because as you go to update it, after you play a game and you want to add a new line, maybe you're going to update it by downloading the updated chapter and shooting that up to Chessable, or you may enter a new line in Chessable itself. We'll look at both ways of doing that, actually. But let's download this PGN. We're going to download the chapter PGN, and that will just download into our download folder. And then what we are going to do is we're going to go into Chessable. All right, so once we're in Chessable, we just go to the main screen. And up here under Tools, you'll see an option called Create a Course. That's what we're going to do. We're going to create an opening course. So we're going to click on that. You can see there's a little tutorial. We're not going to bother with that, actually. What we're going to do is we're going to type the name that we want the course to be named into this title box here. I'm typing in Chessable Play and Win White Repertoire. Now, you can see there's different choices for different types of courses. It's not a tactics course, strategy, or endgame course. It's actually an opening course, so we're just going to leave that at opening. Now, this is a repertoire for white, so we're going to leave it for white. You could do it if it was black. You'd want to change that to black if you were doing like, a Slav course or something. So let's hit submit, and then it'll start creating our course. Now, you can see it says your new course, Chessable Play and Win White Repertoire, was added. You need to add some lines by the opening Explorer or import them from a PGN. Now, we want to import them from a PGN, so we'll click that. And what you can see here is that you can just take that file that we downloaded from Lichess and we'll drag it into here where it says import. So I'm going to do that now. And now you can see it says Lichess Study, Chessable YouTube White Repertoire, blah, 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 blah. So we know that we got that file in there. We're going to choose what file we want it to. We want the Chessable Play and Win Repertoire for white. And it says select which chapter in course. So what we're going to do is one little additional thing. We're going to leave this at the default chapter. Now, remember when I was talking before how you can structure this how you want? Now, if you had decided you want to have like a different chapter in your Chessable course for the King's Indian Defense, the D4, D5 stuff, another one for the Dutch maybe, and everything else or something, then we would have wanted to create a chapter for each one of those. And so we would have named one like main line, one like, Indian structures or something, and then downloaded each of those into those specific chapters. And we would choose this, we would basically go into the course first and then add those chapters. But since we did it just as one chapter, we can just leave it as it is. But the one thing we want to do is we want to click this thing here that says import all sub-variations as their own item. So if we don't do that, what'll happen is, like in Chessable courses where they kind of have like additional things that aren't clickable, but they're just kind of like additional information, that's how it would import those. So we'll leave this allow duplicate variations unchecked. We don't want that. Like, it wouldn't be an issue in this case, but as we go to update the course, we want we don't want it to like re-enter additional lines when we send updates to this. And we'll do that after we create this repertoire. There's a couple ways you can add on to it as you go. One is you just build the lines right here within Chessable, and the other is we'll just re-download the file from our Lichess study and upload that in, and then anything that's already in there, it just ignores and only adds new things. So maybe you just want to like periodically, like once every couple weeks or something, update it. That's probably what I would suggest, and we'll go through how to do that. But so everything looks good to me now. So we'll just hit this import button. And it says you've imported the PGN file into the course, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to check it? We can say yes, we'll check it. And as you can see, it gives a line for each of those lines we did. Now, it's not going to name it anything. We have to do that ourselves if we want to name it. Now, you might not even care. If you split it up into chapters, then you might not care either. But if you want to, we can go in and we can name those. But what we would do is we hit edit variations here, and we could name this, like main line 1. Well, this is actually, I see this is the Dutch Raphael. Line 1, whatever you want to name it, you can go through and name these things, but that's good enough for now. And what we'll do is I'll actually go into the course just so we can see that it works. So you would be able to get at this from your normal menu too. If you wanted, you can drag a picture on here, right? Like if you wanted to add a picture to it. I won't do that for now, but so we could either learn it or we could browse it. So let's just browse it first. And you can see that line we renamed shows up as that renamed line. And if we click on it, it looks just like a Chessable course, because it is. And we can flip through these. And it'll function just like any other Chessable course. So, and you can see those comments that we put in. After queen to h6, we had this comment, say, preventing castling. Here we have with strong compensation. So what we can do, if we want to, we can say learn moves. And this is just like any other Chessable course, the same kind of options as to whether you want to train the whole variation and how often you want it to be repeated and drill you and that kind of stuff. But let's just do the learn function so that we can see that it works. We're going to try to ram through e4. Now, if we were actually doing this, we would have put more explanations and it would be popping up over here. But you'll see it'll pop up when we play queen to h6. See, preventing castling for queen to h6. And then this is the line where they take it. We castle, and it says strong compensation for the pawn. So it appears everything is working. We'll do the thing here real quick where we do the drill. So let's just buzz through it here. And Chessable makes you do it 3 times. I guess it's making us do it 2 times. And then if we hit next lesson, we'll just make sure it's queuing it up. So this was the other line where they didn't take there. So everything appears to be functioning as it should for what we have at this point. And so that's our steps on how we make the course. And like I said, if you wanted the different chapters, that's an option as well. So let's, what I'm going to do is we're going to pretend that we've made some updates to our course. We'll make a couple updates, and then we'll reload those up to here. All right, so now let's say we want to update the Chessable course because we've added some new lines to our repertoire. So let's just throw some new stuff in. Let's pretend we added some stuff against the. Let's say we added some stuff against the King's Indian defense, and let's say we were straying a bit from Alex's course, and let's just say we were going to just play the cheesecake. And we decided what we were going to do is we're just going to do something along these lines here. And then let's put another one in, and let's just put something really simple against the Grunfeld. So let's say in this position here, let's say they played d5 and we were going to play b4 just to stop c5. And let's just say, we had other stuff too, but let's just say, okay, now we want to update that Chessable course because we've added these new lines to it. So basically what we would do is we would download this database file again, go down here and download the chapter PGN. And then what we'll do is we'll pop back into our Chessable course. So we'll go into the course itself. And it kind of, appears like we're going to be studying it or whatever. But what we're going to do is we're going to say import from PGN. Because we're going to add more stuff to it. Or we can say add variations. But what we're going to do is we have everything in this PGN file. We're going to import it from that PGN. Once again, we drag that new file into there. We're going to put it into that default chapter. Now, some people may have made new chapters. You would just choose what you want it to go into. If you did break it up by chapters. And we just want to make sure that we do not allow duplicate variations, so we do not want that checked. But we want all sub-variations as their own item. So otherwise they'll just be non-clickable. They'll be clickable but not studyable, basically. So we just want to make sure it says import all sub-variations as their own item. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit the import button. And it says it was successful, and yes, we'll go check it. And so now I believe it'll be at the bottom probably. Yeah, right here. So these are the two new items. So like if we pull this up, we will see that we have our new lines are in the course. And this is like the line we added to the Grunfeld. Probably the next one will be the line we added against the King's Indian, the good old cheesecake here. So that's basically how you can just easily, maybe you want to do it once every 2 weeks or something. As you're playing your games, you're analyzing them, you're adding new moves to your repertoire, Lichess study. Just download it, upload it like this, and it gets updated. Now, you may want to, as you're doing this, if you want to, you can go through and come up with titles for these. And maybe you decide you just want to just have chapters, like different stuff for the King's Indian, different stuff for the Grunfeld, whatever. And you just basically don't really care so much about the titles then. But the good thing is you can go in and you can organize it as you wish. You can go in and name all the variations if you want. You don't have to. The good thing is like you can use this browse repertoire tree function on your own repertoire. You can see we got 8 variations in here. And You know, you can use this to just jump to a specific line anyway. So you could just do the find in courses, and you'll notice that if we do that, it'll probably be towards the bottom. But right here, and then it'll take you to the 2 lines in our course that have that. So yeah, it's pretty good. And so what I'll do last is I'll just show how we can add some variations if we didn't want to import them from Lichess, if we just wanted to add them straight into there. So let me do that here. All right, so if we want to add a line directly in Chessable, not adding into our Lichess study and then importing it into Chessable, what we do is we just open the course in Chessable, and then we go under this administrative options on the right side here. So we go to our control panel for that course. And what we want to do is we can click manage chapters here. And we only have 1 chapter, so we're going to edit the variations. That's this choice here. It'll take just a second. And then we'll have this owner options panel over here on the right hand side. And what we want to do is we want to hit add variations. So we'll do that. And it kind of takes us down to these instructions. But what we can do is we can just enter the line manually up here on the chessboard. And so let's say we ended up transposing into the French more than we thought we would, and we wanted to add a little bit to this. And we know before we were playing the exchange. And let's just say we wanted to play c4, and we wanted to play this Monte Carlo variation. And our idea is we're going to get this isolated pawn and just try to attack these people. Well, what we can do is we can put comments actually on these moves. And, you know, we'll just throw a random comment on here, hitting the center. And then what we can do is once we have everything in there, we could name this variation. So I'm just going to type Monte Carlo variation in there. Type Monte Carlo French. We're going to choose our course. If you've made more than 1 course, more than one will show up there. I've actually made some. So it'll show our thing. If you put a picture on there, it'll show up there. Otherwise, it'll have the course name. And then if you did decide that you broke it out into multiple chapters, those chapters would show up in this drop-down box right here. We just have the 1 chapter, so we'll put it in there. And the only thing on here is just we want to put the opening color to white because this is a course for a white repertoire. And then we can just hit add variation to book. And it said, are you sure you want to add it? Yeah, we do. Let it do its thing. And it says it's done and we want to see it. Yes, we do. So let's hit yes, let's see it. And it will load that specific line. It has that comment we put in there. You can see it is just in the main level, so this would be at the bottom because it's the most recent one we added in. You know, we could go in and learn it just like anything else. We would just click on it, make sure it's there. The comments did come forward. It's just this Monte Carlo French. And voila, if you just wanted to add 1 line or something, this is another way of doing it. Then you don't have to go through all the importing stuff. So whatever you think is easier is just absolutely fine. But anyway, that I guess concludes the video. I hope you found it helpful. You know, just I guess enjoy making some courses if you want, or exploring the openings and dabbling with them and making Chessable courses out of it. It's something new to try. So anyway, have a good one. Take care.